Welcome to the Fit Affiliate podcast, where we talk about behavior and behavior-based conversations as they relate to CrossFit affiliate owners and coaches. My name's Lisa Hetherington, and I'm your co-host. Sitting alongside me are Tony and Chuck, the founders of Fit Affiliate.
I have a smaller microphone.
That's an interesting conversation to note to start the conversation. It's not about size, Chuck. And welcome back to the Fit Affiliate podcast.
So big
on
in
that
your
note.
hands.
It does.
It's because I've got huge hands. Dude, Liam's hands and feet are getting fucking super big, and it's weird. He's growing so fast.
They're outstripping the rest of him. Sitting here for the Fit Affiliate podcast for another week of insight and entertainment, hopefully, and we've already started off on a fine note. Sitting with me are Chuck Bennington and Tony. How are you, gentlemen?
Fantastic.
Good.
That's great. Today, I thought our topic could be something around, I know we talk about behaviors and behavior-based conversations. So let's talk about affecting change and why it's more important to affect change than to prescribe action, because that's what we do. Or we don't prescribe the action, but we affect the change. But you've done some posts in social about that, and I thought it was a really good topic to dig a little bit deeper into today.
Can we start with the excitement that you had for your tagline?
Yeah, I was very excited about my tagline.
Well, what questions do you have, my fair coordinator?
Well, let's talk about, the power of affecting change as a coach versus, the perils of prescribing action and giving a template for action. I mean, this is, some people might be confused by that.
It's interesting to think that all of these conversations exist in the day and age where YouTube is a thing. Like, pause and reflect for a minute that you have at your fingertips in a few moments access to every piece of human history and information ever recorded. And on YouTube, you can probably get world-class instruction in any skill, technique, talent. Like, the world is your fucking oyster. And so what would be the use of prescribing any type of action when all of the actions that anybody could ever want or need have been just available to them for free at a moment's notice the entire time the conversations ever existed? So like that's the lens that I look at, just me personally, like, prescribing action is fairly irrelevant, because if it was just about prescribing action or having information, we'd all be billionaires with 8-packs, because like it's all out there. You can find a million like blueprints to make both of those things happen. And so it's not about being prescribed the action or having the information. It's like, well, why aren't you taking the actions? Why aren't you doing the thing? Why don't we have the behavior habits?
I think too, people would prefer, they can get overwhelmed when they're looking, like, I know I've Googled how to do something and you're like, well, which is the right one? And, it's sometimes you want a nice curated, or people,
well, that's like, that is part
a curated list.
Coaching. And so maybe that is the people that it ends up being more useful to engage in a coaching relationship with, to like actually have a coaching relationship and not just like a transactional piece of information. But for people to be like, hey, I know what my problems are. I know the ways in which I would like to try to solve them. Can you help me collapse time and find better ways to solve this now that we have a more congruent conversation, rather than having to like just build the base level of awareness? Be like, you don't need another fucking plan or strategy, right?
Yeah.
Which is the other side of that line.
Yep.
Change is just, it's a deep conversation, right? I mean, the entire nature of the industry at large is centered around change. Today's post, which was ironic, I suppose, and that Lisa just always blindsides me with these podcasts, so I never really know what we're walking into. But now I'm starting to get I'm just going to start posting like yellow banana, and then you're going to be like, I think we should talk about banana colors on this call. But anyway, I mean, change in itself is a central frustration, not just to our industry though, but people in general, right? Like if you cohabitate in a household, I'm assuming at some point you want somebody else to change, or something should change, or you would like to be instrumental in somebody's change, or maybe you work in a workspace or a workplace and change is necessary or needed. I mean, so change is prevalent, change is common, but the question is that why don't more people change, right? I mean, respectfully, most people are in pursuit of some degree of change. What they lack is essentially awareness, right? And so I think for a lot of people, the first part of it, there's really like 5 parts of this conversation, I think. But the first real big part of this is understanding the mechanism of change, because I think most people, they know it to be true. They know it to understand it and to be a necessity. But I don't think they understand it. Like, people don't want to do it, right? And even if you are well motivated, well intended, very few people really truly want to upend some degree of comfort, pursue some degree of discomfort for an unfortunate or unknown potential future, and be like, I hope this goes well. So generally speaking, you're just not going to likely get them to take that action, which is really where the coach's journey comes in, right? Because generally what ends up happening is that most people who are after change aren't after change at all. They're after the ability to abdicate responsibility, period. Right. And so this is an unfortunate circumstance and situation to find yourself in as a coach, because they have convinced you that they would like to change. And then you would attempt to employ all of your services and resources to get them to change, only to find out they don't really actually want to change to begin with. And they really want it to be your fault. Right. Like, and so you see a lot of this all the time, but let's assume that that's not the case in this situation. And these people are not trying to abdicate this responsibility. They do, in fact, want to change. I mean, the central rule behind all things change is essentially the action paradigm, which is people will not change until the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of change. That's it, right? And so as it applies to this conversation, how do you get people to change? Well, the question then starts with, how uncomfortable are they? And most people, that's the conversation that's not there. I mean, most people would be like, it would be nice to lose a couple of pounds. It'd be nice to be able to have sex with the lights on. It'd be nice, but like, it's also nice not having to do anything. So it's a conversation of competing against their conventional lifestyle and resources. So they're just like, yeah, I guess I don't really want, because why doesn't everybody have abs? Right? I mean, for the same reason I don't have abs 95% of the year, right? Because it's like, food, whatever. Like, there's a certain level of discomfort that I'm willing to invest in this thing to get the intended outcome. So I'm like, this is good enough, right? I think the goalpost moves and it is what it is, right? But like, that one trip's coming up and you're like, gotta get it together, right? They're willing to embrace that degree of discomfort to take that change, because the pain of showing up to the beach certainly seems way worse when they have to keep their t-shirt on. So they're like, I'm good. I'm willing to do the work right now for this period of time to be able to have that result. And that's really one of the easiest ways to do it. But that's much easier when there's an intended end result. We've got to do this with people in their entire lives, their entire careers, their entire businesses. That's a much different conversation.
I think that's an interesting thing to pause on for a second. Sorry to jump in, but just
you go.
The ambiguity of the timeline is such an important thing to talk about, and it's so much easier to get people to take action when they have a defined begin and end point. And like, for any gym owners out there that really struggle because they hate seeing all these gyms in their town, run these 28-day challenges, you need to reframe that, like, that's a big piece of what allows people to cross that mental hurdle to take that step in the gym, because they're like, well, it's 4 weeks. If I hate it, it's only 4 weeks. And I would venture to guess that most people that end up running ads for a 28-day challenge aren't actually even selling that at all. But like, that helps you appreciate why that is so prevalent, because people need that get out of jail free card. Like, how many of us have ever survived a fucking game of Monopoly early on when we're bad at it, when we're struggling, because we can simply pass go and get another $200? And for a lot of people, when they invest in like making changes to their health and fitness, they are so subconsciously assured, they're like, once again, I will most certainly fail this thing. So at least I only have to fail my way forward for like 28 days or for 30 days or for like X piece of defined duration.
So, I mean, getting into the tactical part of that, right, which is kind of a continuation of the 28-day nonsense, I think generally, based on my experience with these consults and the amount of time I've spent with affiliate owners, sales is a thing that people just don't really like to do in affiliates. Respectfully, I get it, because like trying to convince people of things is kind of just not that fun, right? So It's the conversation of sell me this pen or sell me this pencil, right?
Mm.
In order for me to effectively sell you this pencil, I have to convince you that you need a pencil. Right? Like, that's a very difficult thing when I have this one pencil and I have to get you to give me money for this pencil. The only way I'm going to get you to do that is either A, tell you how amazing this pencil is compared to every other pencil on the planet. But let's be honest, it's just a pencil, right? Like, it can only do, even if it's mechanical, it can only disperse its lead slightly better than another pencil, right? So it's like marginal at best. So the only logical way I'm going to sell you this pencil is get you to accept that you need a pencil, right? Like, so my best chance is being like, sell me this pencil, I'd be like, hey, do you mind signing this check? Right? Like, and you're like, I don't have a pen, right? So now there's a need for you to have a pen or a pencil. So now I've got a chance at getting you to have that. This is the very nature of the change conversation as it applies to change inside an affiliate, when it applies to getting other people to make change. It has to start with awareness, because truthfully, at the end of the day, what you have is a pencil, right? Like, your entire program, most affiliate owners don't like sales because they want to make assumptions about the person that's sitting down with them. And then from that point forward, they have to spend the remainder of this call trying to convince you to buy 3 days a week, 5 days a week, or unlimited, and why their program is the best program against all the other programs in town, and why their pencil is special. That sucks. When all you had to do is say, what seems to be the problem for you, Lisa? That's it. That's literally it. That's the entire sale in an affiliate. And then guess what follows? A conversation. That entire conversation leads them to a few things. The first thing that conversation leads them to is awareness, right? That has to happen, right? Without awareness, people are not going to take any degree of actions, let alone change. From there, you can then pose them the alternative solutions to their pain, right? And then from there, they would intake, or hopefully they would incite or take action, right? That's really it. But that part is missing from the conversation, because in more situations, in more instances than not, most people are just trying to tell you what to do. They're making assumptions about what you need, and instead of getting to know what the problem is and then helping you become aware of what your actual limitation is. Right? So it's no wonder why change is so frustrating to be able to get people to do. And then also for the person who wants to change, they're just like, I wanted to change this. I didn't want anything to do with rope climbs. So, I mean, that's where it's got to start. And respectfully, the I don't like sales conversation is really just an understanding of like, I don't understand my job because I don't know how you coach. It's impossible if you don't start with conversation. You're not a coach, you're a trainer, and that's okay. But we got to talk about that next.
And I think people, you know, human nature being what it is, we tend to go for what's the easiest path with the least amount of discomfort. You know, just give me the answer and I'll get it done. Just tell me the way. When, you know, in the context of affiliate owners, tell me, and that's why the marketing can be successful for them, is like, or being marketed to, tell me how to get more leads. Tell me how to solve, you know, how you're going to fix my problem, and I'm just
we were on a
do it. They want the
consult
blue pill.
yesterday with somebody that had set up more recently for a gym marketing solution, and blah blah blah, like talked through all the numbers, and would need 50 appointments a week for the whole thing to work out. And we're like, can we just pause for a second and get you to appreciate if you had a magic wand and it all worked out? Run us through what this looks like to have 50 appointments in a week.
Yeah, how's this looking for you? And it's about getting, you know, as an affiliate owner, you can get excited by and blinded a little bit by, yeah, I got 50 people a week coming to me, you know, it's going to be amazing, but it's the solutions being given without understanding the capacity
And so
to
that ends up being the
act.
follow-up. Is Tony and I got on the phone after the consult, and the conversation we had is how nice it is for us to be in a consultative selling environment where we don't have some shit like product or service to just shove down somebody's throat. It's that we have the ability to figure out, all right, well, where are you right now? Where would you like to be? What are the struggles that you're aware of that stand between where you're at and where you would like to be? And then let us guide you through the decision-making process of recognizing, hey, do you want to step forward into an alternative version of how you're behaving where these problems can be solved? Or is the decision that you're consciously making that we can be a part of you helping understand that, no, I am actively choosing to retain the same actions, the same beliefs, and the same behaviors, and I'm willing to stay in this place now that I understand that it won't get me to my goal, and I understand that it's absolutely a part of what has materialized these problems. And I think that that's why a lot of people struggle in sales, is because they just don't look at it as basically educating somebody to help them make a decision.
And that can feel like an uncomfortable conversation to get into at the first point of talking to somebody, which is why, we tend to fill the conversation, the gap in the conversation, but fill it with all the things that we do and our what's, rather than asking the questions and waiting for the answer.
It's just a reframe, right? You have to step out of the room. I mean, listen, I don't want this whole call to be about sales, or this whole podcast to be about sales. But let's be honest, if you're going to get people to change, you're going to need to persuade them, right? There's going to need to be some degree of persuasion, and that's all sales is, right? But like the people who do find it uncomfortable to press and question and ask and provoke those things, it's all due to a lack of belief and understanding in what it is that you are actually capable of doing. So instead of just asking questions, you find this need, this compulsion to justify what you do. And so you just basically, you vomit all of your features and options all over them. They don't even care about any of them, right? Because like what you're going to do with a client that sits down in front of you on day one and tells you, if they do in fact tell you that they are in pain, whatever that be, physical, emotional, whatever this is. And if they've expressed that pain and what they have done to address it before and how they failed, right, what you're going to do doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that they believe that you're going to solve the problem and you believe that they're capable of solving their own problem. If you guys can't both do that, you shouldn't be working together, right? But like, that requires an honest conversation, in that you need to get to the root of the problem so that you believe that, like, I believe that I have the ability to solve your problem, and I'm going to take on your project, and it's going to be my job for the duration of this project to transfer that belief to you. And once that's done, we can move on to the next thing. It's not about thrusters, burpees, 21-15-9, AMRAPs, Metcons. None of that stuff matters. Those are things that you're going to do, and they're going to be very helpful in their journey, and they're going to be instrumental in their change, but they don't care about those things. What they care about is, can I believe in Chuck? And if you can't convey that in a sit-down conversation, as a person who wants to make this your career, I'm a little bit worried, but it's pretty easy to do it if all you do is stop talking to them and start asking questions instead. That's it. Just let people know that you care about them. The easiest way to do that is listen to them. Stop trying to tell them about your bathrooms and your toilets and your workouts and your membership programs and how many people you try to send to the games and all these. They don't care. They're never going to care. The only thing they care about is that, like, are you the dude? If you're the dude, I'll give you the money. But if I'm not sure you're the dude, I'm not going to give you this money. So when they don't give you the money, just know you didn't convince them you were the dude.
And the limitation and the gap in the skill exists on the backside of the relationship too. We had another call at a different point in the day with a longtime owner with what a lot of people would consider a very, very, very successful affiliate. And this owner's running into some issues, and the team being able to translate a lot of like her skill set and her vision down to the clients. And it amounts to it's sales reframed as persuasion, reframed as really just giving a shit about people and helping them make decisions that are in their best interests. And for them, it was very tangibly materialized as rope climbs in a workout that sent the community into a tizzy because it just wasn't contextualized well. It was like, hey, we are mad that we have to do rope climbs, and nobody ever paused to reflect on how rope climbs are relevant to the things that they struggle with and the things that they desire. Nobody ever stopped to ask them why the rope climbs were a struggle. And so it's one of the biggest missing pieces that we see play out across the industry. And it's that Sales is looked at so favorably that people never investigate it as an area of development or a skill set to acquire, and it ends up being one of the largest things to handicap them in their growth and journey as a coach. Whereas a lot of coaches, they continue to ascend, especially further into like a professional coaching pipeline, they end up incidentally picking up a huge sales skill set because they start understanding you're really just helping people understand themselves, their decisions, risk and reward, opportunity cost, structures of belief. I think that most coaches would fucking accelerate so much personally and professionally if they just leaned into sales super aggressively in the very beginning of their journey, because it would build them a skill set that would serve them so much better on the back end in all of the ways that they really want to. Anyway.
No, I totally agree. And
I mean, that is the topic for the podcast, is really affecting change. And like, how do we affect change? Like, you sell people constantly. A fault and fix cue correction relationship, like that is a sale. I want you to squat deeper. You don't want to squat deeper because you got to move more ass through more range, and that's hard. It sucks. And so how do I help you understand that like it is actually what you want, and it is the thing that moves you further from hell and towards heaven, and it's why we're doing this, and it is important to you, not me. I don't want you to squat deeper because I give a shit about you squatting deeper. I want you to squat deeper because like that's what solves your problems.
And I think, you know, back to a little bit what you said earlier about abdicating responsibility, people, you know, are looking for the solution so that they can either say, well, that solution didn't work, that was a bad solution, rather than, you know, something they did do or didn't do, or didn't want to admit that they didn't have the capacity to understand to do, or the skill. So it's easier if you've given a solution to dismiss that versus, you know, critically think about something.
Well, abdication, I think, comes from a little bit of a different place in that, you know, everybody is aware to some degree that they have to change, but like really abdication comes from a loss of ability to believe in whatever that is, right? Whether that be like a lot of people have this loss of ability to believe in that they're going to make more money, or they're capable of making more money, or worthy of making more money, right? Some people, it's that like, you know, I need to lose weight, but I can't because it runs in my family, or, you know, whatever it is. Essentially what they look for when abdicating is comfort, right? And because by abdicating it and really making it somebody else's fault, when they fail, it's not their fault, right? It proves their limiting belief correct. And because of that, that's a very dangerous slope, because you can imagine it spirals out of control very quickly. But the real thing that it does is it makes it okay for me to be in the situation, this discomfort that I'm in, because even Chuck couldn't help me. Okay, it's not my fault anymore, right? And like that's really what it comes down to. But moving from there forward into beyond abdication, like even the person who wants to abdicate doesn't truly actually want to abdicate. It's just all they know to do, right? It's their only defense mechanism that they have. The bulk of how this works is centers around essentially awareness. We have all, no matter whether you are a coach or you just are a member of an affiliate or don't even do CrossFit, we have all found ourselves in a situation with another human where you just want to shake them, right? You're like, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Like, what the hell? And no matter how logical you present them information, no matter how much you explain to them what they're doing, no matter how much you tell them how to do it better, they just don't either get it, they don't listen, or even worse, they resist and deny it. They're like, no, you're wrong, right? And you're like, I can't be wrong. All of the numbers say otherwise. They're like, I don't believe it. It's not happening, right? And like this probably mostly happens between significant others, right? Because they're just like, I'm not listening to anything you say. I know you might be right, but no, right? But like that centers around one giant lacking piece of the conversation, and that's awareness, right? Because it doesn't matter how much I want to shake you and how much I want to tell you and teach you and just dump information and facts on you until you are aware that this isn't working or this is broken or I have failed. Will you be aware or open to alternatives? And at that point, once that's there, then the conversation can happen between us being like, well, how would you like to improve that? Or what would you do? Right? And then the conversation just starts to roll and you get to dig deeper and you get to the root. And then you get agreed upon action. But the nice part about that is that once I've given you awareness or helped you find awareness, and then we've presented alternatives together, right? When that action comes up, it's probably going to be your idea. And what do you think is going to happen when a client comes up with their own idea to solve their problem versus has to figure out how to implement your problem, right? I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that they're going to run into the fire with their own idea. And more often than not, because you guided them there, you know it's going to be okay. You guys have done this on the training floor thousands of times without realizing it, right? Because you've been able to utilize the most effective screen of human movement that's ever been put together on the planet, right? To get them to become aware of their own fault patterns, their own movement inefficiencies, their own lack of ability to perform in comparison to other people in the class. And that's uncomfortable. So then they look for alternatives. They look for a different way to do it, and they become open. And that's why in a CrossFit setting, plasticity is probably one of the most prevalent common things that people don't realize exists on like a day-to-day, every single day basis. And it's the neurological aspects of fitness that get so undervalued in CrossFit, right? But like the reason you guys can create so much change in a physical setting is because CrossFit is in its entirety, its objective nature is about creating awareness. Truly defining, just like in gymnastics in general, how far from perfect you actually are. And you're like, fuck, I got work to do, right? And then they're aware, but you got to get them to that point first. It all starts with awareness, but most people overlook it. You come back from your L1, your L2, your L3, whatever it is, and you got so much more information. You're like, this is the cue I need. And you just keep throwing them at them, and they just keep bouncing off. But you never stop to say, why is this a problem for you? And then go from there.
I think
we're done here.
I think mic drop, we're out. That's the end of the call. Good chat.
But I think it's like we come back to it so often. There have been so many podcasts that we've recorded that have touched on this idea of building awareness, and really just so much of it through better questioning. But to find examples to contextualize it, because it's really so simple that it's part of why it gets lost, just hidden in plain sight. Okay, you wanna fix your nutrition. Well, we're probably gonna have you eat some broccoli. Well, I hate broccoli. Okay, well, like, let's investigate it. And you spend some time going through it, and it turns out that they hate broccoli because they're eating raw broccoli backwards from the butt of the stalk. And they eat like, they eat 3 or 4 inches of like the very base of the broccoli stalk. And they're like, yeah, I eat it. And it sucks. And so it's miserable. So I bail. And then maybe like you help them think about some other foods that they like that, are maybe cooked or seasoned or have some amount of preparation. Maybe you get them to, think about what would happen if you tried the other side of the broccoli instead. And we use the other side of the broccoli and we roast it with a little bit of olive oil and fucking sea salt. And all of a sudden they're like, I actually love broccoli. And be like, right. So the broccoli wasn't the problem. It was your awareness of what to actually fucking do with broccoli. That was the problem. It's an awareness game. And that should make coaching so much more fun, especially on a longer timeline. For any of the coaches out there that feel like they've lost the coach's calling, where they're just burned out and frustrated, it's probably because you stopped being super curious and you started thinking about answering a bunch of questions and giving a bunch of advice instead of just stopping to figure out, like, where did you get so far off track? Why are you the way you are? Like, humans are endlessly interesting and fascinating. And I think that most of us, we go through this real awkward midlife crisis of coaching where we've accumulated so much knowledge and we're searching for validation, and like we just word vomit all kinds of crazy shit. We stop thinking about investigating other humans.
Or just caring, right? I mean, the central core tenet between all of us is that we all pretend to care. But if I watch you continue to open your mouth and keep talking, I'm going to genuinely question how much you actually care about the other person, because it's just impossible to do it. So, I mean, from an actual legitimate, I think, helpful perspective of this, because, this might sound very theoretical or woo-woo, but like there's this common fallacy that exists in all aspects of fitness and athleticism, and that is that, practice makes perfect, or perfect practice makes perfect. Good reps lead to, quality movement, muscle memory, all these other things. But like, that's 100% wrong. Just so we're clear on that. It's actually failure that creates perfection, right? Because at the core of what we do as coaches, us, as well as you, if you are considered a coach, you're a behavioral change specialist, so to speak. It's your job to affect behavior. And behavior, I guess, to make it more easily defined, it's essentially the relationship between mind and body, but also body and mind, right? Because I think a lot of us know that, like, my brain creates behavior, but so too does your body, right? And so that relationship that exists between those two mediums is absolutely what we call behavior. And in order for you to get to a state of learning plasticity, as it's now the buzzword and everybody talks about it, what has to happen is there needs to be an interruption between those two relationships, between the body and the mind, or the mind and the body, for whatever that reason is. And so there's a reason why in CrossFit gyms, grown ass, old ass people are learning these compound, multi-joint functional movements, albeit maybe even at high intensity or otherwise, but like grown ass, whole ass, damn near geriatric people are learning muscle ups for the first time in their life. That's not because they're putting in all the reps over and over and over again. Sure, they're doing that to build the strength, so when they do get it there, but like they have been posed and demonstrated and exposed to failure over and over and over again, to the point where every single class and every single coaching and skill session, they have get to invoke a state of plasticity where they're willing to listen, seek alternatives, and then employ those alternatives. That happens uniquely in even a poorly ran CrossFit gym, but even in the best ones, even more. And that's why so many people learn so many new skills so much later on. And that's why, like, you've heard us talk about it before, like, it's not this fanciful thing that we have, this romantic relationship we have with CrossFit. Like, when you become good at CrossFit, it literally truly affects the rest of your life, because you start to be able to learn and develop and evolve in every single key area of your life, whether it be your career, your personal life, or otherwise, because you start to understand the value of discomfort. You start to understand the value of failure. You start to understand the willingness to put yourself in a situation that's truly just uncomfortable, because you know that that's where you're going to get better. People who don't walk into a CrossFit gym, just so if you guys have forgotten this, they don't fucking do that. They avoid that shit at all costs. Anything that's remotely uncomfortable or potentially could go wrong, they're like, shouldn't do that, right? And I could take almost any CrossFitter who's done CrossFit for like 2 or 3 years, and those assholes will run face first into a brick wall if they think that's what they're supposed to do. They know it's going to hurt, but they're like, I got to get better at this run into a brick wall thing, right? Like, the shit that happens in a CrossFit gym becomes so normalized to you. You have forgotten what it's like to pursue or to avoid failure at all costs. And so if you need to get people to change, and you do, whether you are their boss, whether you're their coach, whether you're their significant other, whether you're their father, their mother, whatever that is, like, you have to expose them to failure. You have to make them aware so that you can pose them alternatives, and then together you guys can pursue action. It's failure. That's how you create change in behavior.
And I think we're told a lot, and this is where some of the confusion can come in, I guess, or conflict is, failure is perceived as bad. It's like, it's bad to fail. You don't want to be a failure. So people aren't willing to put themselves out to be in that uncomfortable space where they risk failing. So they want to stay in that. Again, we come back to comfort. Like, just tell me the answer so I don't have to look stupid and fail.
Man, the failure one is a tough one, because
I mean, right, like, so failure is a necessary condition for learning and growth, but at what point do we also need to be like, cool, failure is also not an option? Because, like, how many failures do you give a kid before you stop them from trying to learn how to walk? You just keep running the fucking experiment until they no longer fail to walk. And I think that maybe, like, that's the awkward in between, where we've never, out loud socially, like, just as a big construct, really evaluated this conversation of this, grade school assignment of letter grades, like, fucking meet product qualities, and failure is bad. But we also juxtapose that with knowing that failure is necessary for learning and failure is necessary for growth. So failure is bad, but we kind of need it. But we don't really talk about, like, the later stages of a thing. And I think it probably is important to recognize that, like, you need to be willing to fail forward, but you need to maintain the intention of at some point not failing.
Which
there
is
needs to be
essentially
like some goalpost. There needs to be some structure for success. And I think that's a big piece that is behavioral that relates earlier to what we were talking about in like timelines. People need some defined end of, it's really hard for the average person to just engage in discomfort. And that's, we're just talking about. And so to recognize that at some point, like your relationship with discomfort changes. And this is not a permanent state. How discomfort resonates with you right now in your first couple of weeks of thrusters and wall balls. And yeah, man, I remember trying to use the toilet the first time I did Karen too. And that was a terrible few days. And I'm glad that bathrooms have handicapped people that maintain some grab bar access for me to be able to like manage it. But the nature of the discomfort changes because like how we perceive that failure changes. And I think that we just need to be okay talking about it as like it's a necessary piece of the human experience. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It's a thing.
Well, failure is just awareness, right? In theory, if something follows it, right? I mean, you can fail over and over again, and we know lots of people who have failed as a system and whatever that looks like. But like the next step of that, awareness is the first key, making somebody aware. But this is where you guys come in on step 2, which is alternatives. All that education, all those levels, all those things that you have pursued, those get to be deployed as potential alternatives. Lisa, have you considered maybe doing it like this? What about if you did it this way? Have you tried this? Like all those things come from your knowledge base to pose alternatives, because as we all know, failure is okay as long as we learn from the failure, right? That's where you guys come in. It's not about just telling them what to do now that you've watched them fail. Be like, good, next time do it this way. Okay? Their ability to process that is going to be very much limited to their own perception, their own experience, and frankly, their own coordination and athleticism, right? So you have to work with them to pose alternatives, not perfection and instances of absolution. You know what perfect looks like. They need to arrive at that on their own, how they perceive perfection. And that's where alternatives comes in, right? Like Chuck said, with the example of a child, like the easiest way to get them to learn how to stand up and walk is that, like, we all know this, I think at this point to be true, that like children don't learn from being told, they learn mostly from emulation, right? And so that's because all day long throughout their development, they're just exposed to these alternatives of falling down, crawling, whatever. And so eventually they're like, I'm gonna try to stand up like dad. And then they eventually, hopefully they start walking. And so those are the alternatives that are posed in a very, different sense. Imagine, so if as an affiliate owner, you come in and there's a sales problem, right? Sales is just definitely an issue. And like your idea of sales at best is literally free trial. Hopefully that works really well. And then they sign up for something, which is probably the default method. But like, if I just came in as your coach and I was like, you got to learn to sell, I'm going to teach you, it's not going to work, right? Because I guarantee you already know that like you're bad at sales, you don't like sales. So like you could have Googled it, you could have researched it, but like you didn't want to, right? But if instead we came at it from a different area, and we come around the backside of it, and we don't even touch on sales, but we get into your cost of doing business, your cost of fulfillment. What are your absolute costs of this? And you start to realize that like, oh no, I have a huge gap. There's a big gap in between like what it's actually costing me to do this and how much money I'm making. Even worse, the length of time it takes for me to become profitable is like, 7 to 10 months, because like there's no margin there. I never even realized that. Tony, I'm gonna have to charge people more money up front. Okay, well, how do you want to do that? Like, and then now awareness has been posed. And then alternatives can be achieved or displayed at that point. And we can come up with lots of different ways to craft a new front-end offer or new sales process, whatever that looks like. And then from there, because you have now defined that like, dude, I got to close that gap. And not only that, but like now I know where all the money's going. I got to take action. Your rate of success, our client's rate of success is astronomically faster because they didn't have to learn from an online course. They didn't have to go through a module. They didn't have to retain more information, process more information, consider said information, and then figure out how to implement that information. That just takes so long. Right? You already know what to do, just the same as you already know that it's chicken, broccoli, and water. Right? Like the question is not about what to eat, it's why you're not eating it.
Yeah.
Right? And so that stems from a nutrition perspective, a physical perspective, a business perspective, a relationship perspective. Are you aware? of your failure? Are you uncomfortable enough to seek and consider alternatives? Then do you have somebody to give you those alternatives, a trusted source that you can believe in, that they can believe in you? And then once that's happened, you just pick one. Try that. It doesn't matter which one it is. It doesn't need to be the right one. Might fail again. Guess what? Start over again. New alternative, new action. Fail again, new alternative, new action, until eventually one day you're on top of the rings. But it all starts with awareness. And that's the big missing piece, that we get so caught up in this curse of knowledge where you know so much, you don't actually even care what they're struggling with, because you just make assumptions and you just want to just talk at them. And that's why we talk a lot about the difference between training and coaching, is that when you make the shift from training to coaching, you become a behavioral specialist, right? Like, it's your job to affect behavior. In order to do that, you got to stop teaching and you got to start listening. And that's the number one thing that affects affiliate owners, because they don't coach their employees. People in their households don't coach the people in their house. People on the floor don't coach their clients. You have to start with awareness, because you have to care. You got to listen. That's it.
And that's it. It's just that easy, really.
It's really fucking fun, honestly. When you step away from this incessant frustration that you have with, like, how do I get them to know what I know?
How do I reach these kids?
Yeah, and you realize that doesn't matter. What matters is, like, can you help them become aware, and can you pose alternatives? That's a very fun process. Like, it's the most fun thing that you can really, it's the best part of being a coach, is actually getting to become a coach and realizing that you're no longer a trainer. And now what I do is address behavior. It's
and it is fun. And I know when I changed my own approach to coaching, even in the gym, let alone working with clients now, but it's asking the questions and holding the space for the answer, and realizing that there's nothing that's not on the table as a solution, because it's not, well, here's the solution from the template I'm giving you. It could be anything, because it's what works for them, and letting them find it and be excited by it.
I mean, I make some assumptions as to the entire industry, and that if your intention is to become a coach at some point, you're probably starting as a trainer. We all did. But, like, if you're here, I'm going to assume that people fascinate you. They have to. Like, whether that be physical movement, whether that be, their mechanisms of decision making, whether that be just like their career choices. Like, we all end up in this field. Like, we are a clever band of idiots that have all compiled because people fascinate us for various different reasons. And, like, if you're not fascinated by people, you're probably going to stay as a trainer. And that's okay, because, like, people who are fascinated by, like, science and education and knowledge, like, they're great trainers, and the world needs good teachers and trainers. There's nothing wrong with them. But the people who are fascinated with people, we move to coaches, because you just can never turn off the curiosity. You're just always asking. You just want to know. You're like, how is this so hard for you? I genuinely just need to know, because, like, in my brain, it's simple. And in my other experiences, it's been very simple. But, like, why is this hard for you? And then that's a genuine caring curiosity.
Yeah. And you think about, like, watching bad concept 2 rowing at a local competition. And your curiosity is not piqued. You're like, good sir, I would not imagine doing a full hollow hold with my feet strapped in and some kind of upright row to my fucking eyebrows. I don't feel like that would feel very strong. But I'm super curious as to why you have problem solved that this is the way you would like to move. Yeah. Why are you doing this?
Where did you come up with the idea that having a controlled seizure was going to be the way you were going to acquire your first muscle up? Like, blacking out in the middle of any movement is probably never going to be your good friend. Maybe we should break this down into positions. And that's the reason why I gravitated towards gymnastics. Really, and, like, really, Chuck and I both did, right? Is because, like, we viewed gymnastics as what it was. Gymnastics is just behavior, because all gymnastics is human movement perfected. And everything from there is a measurement of how far from perfection you are, which is simply only a measure of your behavior, right? So we were able to see movement as essentially the effective medium that we were able to translate and understand people's behavior. Because, like, when people come up with crazy ways to do simple things, because, like, human movement's very simple. But like if you tell somebody to do something like, hey, get on top of those rings, they're going to come up with some crazy shit to try to figure it out, right? And you can be like, of all the solutions that you had possible to you, why did you choose that one? Like, have you considered maybe let's just hold the positions? No, actually, I never did consider that. I'm like, let's start there because I'm pretty sure we probably can't walk until we can stand up. That makes sense, right? Like, it's just gymnastics is simply just behavior manifested through physical movement. And it's fascinating because if you watch it, it's just purely a demonstration of lack of or perfection of coordination. You're just like, oh, that's going to be, you're going to be fun.
Yeah. And you know, and people can kind of, you know, assume that, well, whatever I think that I need to do, my body's going to do whatever it takes to get me there. And the same with, you know, you can apply that to their thoughts around business. Like, I'm just going to think and, you know, about my problem, and, you know, the universe is going to find a way to get me there, no matter how ugly it is or how much pain or expense it costs me on the way. Whereas really taking it back to that simple behavior is probably the first key to actually being successful.
There's varying degrees of complexity of change, no doubt about it, right? And I think that might be one of the parts that does affect people in some degrees, right? Because like sometimes you can just process and change, right? You can really just step back and be like, and come up with a simple solution. But oftentimes, more often than not, when it's big change, when it's something that is like, you know, earth shattering, the awareness is present, but you need somebody to help you with alternatives, to pose those alternatives. And that's where coaches come in, right? And like, that's the instrumental phase. And as things get more complex and more difficult, the importance of your knowledge base as a coach and your experience becomes very important. But like, it's still simplicity, it's still elegance, right? It's like, it's not about throwing everything under the sun at them until something sticks. It's just, why is this a problem for you? Like, how did you get to this point? Like, how do we get you past that? What is your intended goal here? And that's why gymnastics is so fascinating, right? Because it's just, again, it's just purely, you know, this is what it's supposed to look like. Let me see you do that. Oh, why is behavior manifesting itself that way with you? And then you address it. But that same conversation in a more advanced and maybe, you know, slightly more vague concept plays out in relationships between employees, you know, clients, etc. And you just have to understand that like awareness, alternatives, action are the 3 A's that you need. It's your job to help people crystallize their discontent, get them to be so uncomfortable staying the same that it outweighs their fear of change. And you'll be successful. But if you don't have awareness, I don't know how you do it.
And I think, you know, you can definitely have a more harmonious approach to affecting change, for example, with partners and spouses, rather than telling them what you want them to do. Rather, maybe if you ask them some more questions about why they're doing it a particular way, you can have a bit more harmony if you start to approach things as a
hell of a lot less of a dick, right? I mean, like, imagine how many times you actually have been wrong in your life if you would have just stopped and started asking questions instead of just making assumptions and just telling somebody what to do. And because through the process of coaching, how many of you became better athletes? All of you, right? And that's because through coaching was your ability to reconsider and rethink things that you've done or actions or beliefs that you've had, and you've just improved it. The same thing's got to happen in your relationships. Like, for you to come in and point the finger, as Tosh would say, and use that pointer finger and make assessments and assumptions about the situation, you probably should have just asked questions, you know, and then we could have arrived together at a resolution.
Yep. A much better outcome for everyone. All right. That's been another great, insightful chat. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time today. And looking forward to the next one.
Word.
Always.
Word.
Thank you, my friend, for listening to the Fit Affiliate podcast. If you would be interested in hopping on a free call with us to just kind of chat about what you think your problems are and what you think the gap is between where you're at and where you want to go, we can see if maybe we can help you along that journey, figure out if we're all a good fit to do some sweet things together. So click the link, set up a consult. Let's help you identify some problems that we can mutually solve.